Welcome to episode 4 of the Samong Yang Outdoors podcast, everybody. I'm Nate. I'm here with Samong as usual, and today we are joined with our first guest on the show, which is pretty exciting. Steve, our good mutual buddy, hunting buddy, fishing buddy. His own social media is Northwest Outdoor Adventures. We are getting towards fall bear. It is almost that time. We're coming to the end of July, and so that's what we're going to tackle today. We're going to tackle some fall bear hunting in August specifically. Before we jump into today's podcast, though, we'd like to share with you a couple of the sponsors that make this podcast possible that we're really excited to partner with.
First and foremost, nothing but love to our friends over at Vortex Optics. They've been a longtime partner of mine, so everything you need when it comes to optics, whether your budget is $50 or several thousand, check out vortexoptics.com. They have you covered there.
Another one of the companies that we get to partner with is Onyx Hunt. This is a online hunt mapping software that is really just a total game changer in the hunting world. This is an app that gives you private boundaries, public boundaries, Forest Service, timber company, all the different filters that you could want to see about burns. Just able to really up your game with e-scouting and getting prepared before you go into the field.
Last, we want to also thank Tacticam for supporting the channel. Tacticam is the trail cams we use exclusively now. We've had excellent luck with them. Nowadays, we can just set up a trail cam with the cellular ability, and we don't have to go check our trail cams. Put your trail cam up in a spot where it can receive signal. When something comes through, phone dings, there's your picture right then on the spot.
That's great. Plus, you get to save time and money checking cameras.
Exactly.
If you're not spending gas. And
you're a lot more efficient with the wireless trail cams nowadays.
Absolutely.
Because I spent a whole lot of gas money taking my trail cam. So
yeah. Well, you might know the drill. We're starting to learn the drill that before we get into the podcast here, we are going to start off with our first game. So this is a game where Samong and I have each come up with a quiz question, and today Steve's going to jump in and take a stab at answering some of these questions. Samong, do you want to start us off?
I think for the past 2 episodes, we've nailed these questions off the top of our head.
Yeah.
Yeah, bring it up.
And they're not prepared ahead of time.
No, we don't.
This is not staged whatsoever.
No, I have no idea what Nate's bringing to the table. He has no idea what I'm bringing to the table. So this is all random. And the fact that we've kind of known it's been pretty surprising. That's the most surprising part about this podcast so far. So yeah, with that said, I can start. And in this case, I'm going to be asking for the both of you, so you both can come up with your own answer because this is the first time we've actually had more than just one other person. I'm going to start with something local to us. So my question is a multiple choice question. So here it is. Washington State is home to many mountains and peaks. Mount Spokane is located in the Selkirk Mountains, about 23 miles northeast of Spokane. In terms of feet in elevation, how high is Mount Spokane rounded to the closest 100 feet? For example, 1,100 feet.
I'm going to say 5,000.
Well, did you want the multiple choice options first?
No, I've looked at an Onyx.
Okay. Did you want to take a stab or do you want the options?
Well, I guess I'll follow Steve's suit and I'll just take a stab.
Okay.
And we can go closest. I'm going to say 5,200 feet.
Okay. Do you want me to read through the options or do you want to just give the straight up answer?
Give us the options to make us feel better.
A, 5,200 feet. B, 5,600 feet. C, 5,900 feet. D, 6,100 feet.
I'm going to go with A. You're probably closer.
52. It's either 52 or 56.
Is where I've actually hunted near that mountain.
Yeah.
But I wasn't at the peak, so there's definitely a little bit of elevation to go to the peak. So
are you guys keeping your answers or are you guys going to go with a multiple choice answer?
I'm keeping it.
I'll keep it. Hit us with the truth.
Mount Spokane stands rounded to the nearest 100 feet at 5,900 feet tall.
No kidding.
Wow.
The exact number is 5,887 feet.
There could be multiple people listening to this that are laughing that has the category of mountain here.
Yes, there's a little trivia for you.
Yeah.
All right.
Interesting.
I have got my question for you guys. I am going to go a little bit closer to the fishing theme because Steve is here. And maybe we may not get into it today, but Steve is an avid fisherman.
Absolutely.
And as is Samong, and I tag along. All right. I'm not asking a fishing question at all. That was my fast fact. All right, so I have got my question here then. So this is not a multiple choice. I'm just going to let you ballpark. According to Project Nature Washington, the Methuselah Douglas fir is found in Olympic National Park and is said to be the oldest tree in Washington. How old are you guessing that they estimate this tree to be? Estimate it. They don't know the exact age.
This is the oldest tree in Washington State.
Yep.
Do you have a guess, Steve?
This is a very uneducated guess because I've definitely never paid much attention to tree aging, but just trying to think of it. I'm going to go with 600s.
Okay.
This is something out of the South Field for me. So a random guess in the dark, 350 years old.
All right. They estimate that it is just north of 1,000 years old.
That's incredible.
The same tree standing there for 1,000 years.
That's incredible.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That tree was planted and born in year like 1,000.
So I found this on one source, and then I was like, that can't be right. And so then I started doing a little bit more digging, and sure as golly.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's incredible. I never knew trees can be around that long.
Yeah, that was a question I had zero context to.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
was
I
just
feel
a
like
good
I got to
guess.
throw one out of the South Field sometimes. But
I already thought my answer of 350 years old was high. Clearly not.
we're just young.
Yeah, what a testament. There you go.
We are a blink in that tree's life.
Well, we broke our streak. We got it wrong finally.
Fair enough.
So our questions are getting better. With that said, folks, we're going to turn the table to you guys. If you guys have questions or trivias or later on for Fast Facts and you guys think you guys have something interesting, shoot us a comment in the comment section or shoot us an email. We'd love to share your guys' trivia questions. I think Nate and I could use some help with that. Some of these questions we're asking, people are probably just face palming like,
Oh,
come
I'm
on,
sure.
like that question is not that hard. But we'll leave it to the floor. We'd love to hear you guys'
drop
input.
some questions.
So with that said, fall bear.
Right around the corner.
We're like 10 days out, and we are all getting ready because here in Washington, we actually have one of the earliest fall seasons that open for bear, which is August 1st. Most states open September. Part of Washington back then used to be September 1st. I mean, here in our region, Northeast Washington, it used to always open September 1st. But back in 2019, Washington made the decision to completely open the state to open August 1st. And so for the past 5 years or so, we've had the privilege to go and hunt early season bear, as we would call it nowadays. And since it's open, all three of us here, we've actually been fairly successful at taking a bear. Steve's obviously killed one.
I've killed 2 bears in August.
2 bears in August, and you
I've killed 2 bears in August.
2 bears in August. So we
In fact, I've killed 2 bears on August 25th.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
that's worthy of a fast fact.
I
But-
should have kept it.
But anyway, with that said, in the past 5 years, we have found pretty consistent success, not only just killing bears, but finding bears. When you talk about tagging out, that's a topic of its own, but I've lost count how many bears I have seen in August while just hunting them. I obviously don't kill every single bear I've seen, but clearly, you know, they're around in August, and I think part of that has to do with the simple fact that because nothing else is open in August, you're strictly focusing on bear. Whereas once September hits, so many other hunts are open, and you kind of start diverting your attention to other things. Archery elk, rifle deer, and then opportunities to kill a bear later in that season just kind of becomes an off opportunity where, okay, if I run into a bear, cool. But in August specifically, it's we're after bears and only bears. So last year, Steve killed a bear in August. You killed a bear in August.
Yep.
I killed a bear in August.
Yep.
All three of us, we killed a bear in August. I killed mine August 1st.
Like opening day, right? If I remember
Literally 1 hour into opening day. I killed mine last year with the Peon Wild Boys. You killed yours August 25th. You killed yours
a couple days prior to Nate, maybe a week prior.
a week
Yeah,
prior.
if even.
So even though we're pretty spread out in terms of in the calendar date, I killed mine like early August. You guys killed yours more middle, later August type. The tactics for that hunt, for the most part, kind of stayed the same.
Yeah.
So, Steve, let's jump into your story because you're the guest here. Let's hear a little bit about how you got your bear last year.
Absolutely.
I think before I'll just preface this, knowing Steve's hunt, I think one of the reasons that this story is great is because it is a great case example of August bear hunting. There's some things that make hunting bear in August and hunting anything in August really unique. And so that's something cool.
Some unique challenges and opportunities at the same time.
Yeah.
You guys know this, but I'll tell to the audience. My time in August was quite limited last year, particularly. There were years where I had a lot more time to hunt bear. This wasn't one of those years. Those who know me more personally know I happen to work full-time, and my wife just had a baby recently. I'm also a full-time student in my graduate training, so time is definitely of the essence. That being said, I am very fortunate to have a wife that supports me in those activities, as well as a family and you guys, obviously. So I had pretty much dedicated 5 days to fall bear, and that was going to be likely the only days I would get to hunt that year. So they meant a lot to me, and I had to make the most of them. So going into the hunt, I think I went with the mindset that I would make every hour, every day count. And then for some reason, I love doing, as you guys know, we've done many hunts together from big game to wild turkey. I love hunting with you guys. I love hunting with my dad. For some reason, I really wanted to do a solo hunt just because, as you guys know, when you do a solo hunt, there's just unique challenges. It's an interesting mindset. Just staying in the game is a little harder solo, and I just wanted to go out there and find a bear and hunt one solo, so to say. So I had 10 days off that I had basically lined up between my work schedule. And those 10 days off, I had off of school, basically, because my training goes to the summer as well. So I had 10 days to try to plan a family vacation because I did want to spend some time with my family as well as fit in a bear hunt. So beginning of the 10 days off, we actually all went down to Oregon, did some fly fishing. As you guys might have seen the video on my...
Yep.
Any story of Steve is usually bookended with it started with and ended with fly fishing.
That is true.
Steve is like,
I love
bear hunting, but first I got to go
But let
fly
me tell you
fishing.
about the fly fishing first.
That is so true. So anyways, I had these 10 days. I dedicated 5 of them, basically 4 of them to fly fishing, and then I was going to take a rest day and then go bear hunt. And I had this epic trip planned to Oregon that fell apart. I literally got skunked. I visited all these iconic rivers and all these big plans that just did not work out. So that kind of started my mindset in a way of now my bear hunt's going to hunt, because you start playing games with yourself where, it's not working out. You made these plans. So anyways, we get back home and I depart on my bear hunt. My primary tactic was spot and stalk. Obviously, we can't bait here in Washington. I've never actually hunted bear by baiting. Not that I have anything personal against it. It's just not something we can do here legally, so I never even looked into it. If opportunity ever arises somewhere else, I would definitely be interested in. Just not something I've ever done or know much about. So my primary food source for targeting bears was going to be berries or basically anything berry related. Early spring bear hunts I've done, I focus more on grass and those kind of food sources, but berries was my main. And then elevation, just from my past bear hunting experiences, I typically try to find an elevation band where I see them, good berries. Historically, we know some spots we all like to check out where there's been some historic berries, and definitely tends to change, I think, here for us in Washington every year. So one spot you see berries ripen maybe first week of August. Next year it could be second week, maybe third week. And then berry quality, I've noticed, also changes. So I went to one of the spots we've all hunted before. That's where it started. I believe that is a spot where there is a video of somebody shooting a bear over you.
Oh,
basically shooting. That was a hell of a story. If you guys haven't heard, maybe I'll let you elaborate on that later.
That might be Bear Podcast number 2.
That's
Who
a
knows?
very interesting story. That's
We'll have
deserving
him on
of
the
its own.
podcast.
Yeah. So anyways, it was the same general location where I spent the first couple of days basically just trying to dial in where I was seeing bear scat, because that's usually my indicator of where I would find bear as I look at any kind of scat I can find, and I just try to guess freshness. And sometimes you see one that's dried for weeks, so obviously they've probably moved on. And generally speaking, the berries I found in that area were just really old. They didn't look ripe. There were some berries around, and I ate some myself. But
And when you're saying berries, are these huckleberries?
huckleberries.
Okay.
Yep. There's not many other berries. We'll get to that. There's other berries I've shot bear over now, but primarily I look for huckleberries.
Yeah, primarily here in Northeast, huckleberry is what everybody
Absolutely.
focuses on.
Yep.
Yeah.
And not just any huckleberries. You got to find those big, juicy, because I honestly believe bears do know where the best huckleberries are. To live out there. So I think if you find just a berry patch, there is a lot of berry patches around Washington, and you do kind of find the good ones. And that leads me to my second point. Basically, I wasn't seeing a whole lot of bear activity in that area. The berries were cars, and then they were just dried out. They weren't very good berries. And then just walking around that area, just bushwhacking a little more into some more secluded wooded spots, I found that there was a lot more berry patches I found that I didn't even know existed that were just really deep, dark timber. Your visibility was maybe 25 yards. They just had the most juiciest, biggest berries I've ever found.
And for context, this was somewhere, I mean, I don't know, I know we don't remember the specific date, but somewhere between like the 15th and 20th of August
Absolutely,
last year.
I think there might have been
So we're talking
pretty much
like
the exact dates.
Third
Yeah.
week of August.
Absolutely, yep, exactly. And I've actually heard a few things spooky, and I have no confirmation that was a bear. Really sounded buried, though, so I'm assuming I did spook some berries in those thick timber where you couldn't even see them run. And I was finding some really fresh scat, so basically came to a conclusion they're likely just hanging out in those darker timber wooded spots where it would be hard for me to glass them up, yet alone get a shot opportunity. I tried to do some calling. Those of you guys that know me well, this probably like to fly fish so much. I do have a little bit of attention deficit disorder, I think. So staying patient and calling is not a strong suit of mine. I tend to get impatient and move on too soon.
This is when you picked up my Fox Pro, right?
That's right.
Okay.
Yep. Samong was nice enough to let me borrow one of his calls. And I did try some. I didn't.
The reason why I bring it up is because I tried calling bears with a mouth call, and I blow on it for like 30 seconds, and I quit.
Yeah.
Because it's extremely hard to blow.
Yep.
And bears are notoriously one of the animals with calling.
You gotta
Not
be
that we have a
consistent.
lot of experience with it, but
They have a short attention span.
you have
Yep.
to be on it.
Kind of like Steve. Yeah.
Bears and Steve, a lot in common.
Yeah, there's a lot in common. So when I do bear hunt, I sometimes actually ask myself, like, what would I do?
What would Steve do?
What would Steve do? Exactly. That's probably what the bears are going to do. Find some food and a place to relax, right? And then-
Exactly.
I don't want to bore you guys with too many details, but basically those were some fruitless days. And I think I spent day 1, 2, and 3 basically without seeing any bear. That's when they're kind of doubt and they
Your first 3 days are a prime example of what the average bear hunter encounters
absolutely.
that most people don't realize. Most people will search up a bear hunting video and just be like watching people shoot bears. But
Absolutely.
for the vast majority of the hunt, it's like what you just described. You find a little bit of sign here and there, and
Yep.
sometimes the berries or the food source isn't completely there, and you're just kind of like mindlessly wandering, kind of
Exactly.
like there's no bears out here.
Exactly.
Yeah, and especially in August, like I feel like this is the 99% of the time that surrounds that 1% of action or success that makes
Yep.
the highlight real.
With the heat, I really feel like most of my success or bear spottings happen that very first light and that very last light. The cooler mornings feel good, and then it can get up to 100 degrees where we live in August, and the sun's beating down on you. You're just sweating. There's a lot of bugs in the woods still. There's yellow jackets. You get stung, and it's really just starts to play those mental games on you. And then during the day, you're just like, "There's no bears out here. I'm not going to see one." So then you're tempted to go down the mountain, go get lunch, or in my case, I find rivers that I could go hit and fly fish for a couple hours. So really, it's like staying in that game and just being out there.
So you're day 3, day 4, and just getting skunked.
Exactly. Day 3 and 4 and just pretty much getting skunked. No, so days 1, 2, 3, I got skunked. I pretty much saw no bears. And when we're telling a story now, you say 100 for 3 days. It's not even that long, which is kind of true hindsight. But when you're in the moment, just sitting in the woods, like hours can seem very long, especially when they're fruitless.
Especially those August days where the day starts like at 4:30 in the morning and it ends like at 10 o'clock at
Exactly.
night.
They're very long days. Sleep can be, like you said, a challenge because you're not sleeping a whole lot. By the time you wake up to try and get somewhere, sometimes you're waking up hours before sunrise. And then this particular bear hunt, I didn't even record it. I didn't even bring my cameras between just work, school, and all the things that kept me so busy during the summer. I honestly just wanted to enjoy the time being in nature, being outside, and just enjoy the hunt. As you all know, whenever most of us do hunts, I think we're a pretty good friend group. We've been buddies for a while. We do text each other, which is nice because sometimes you need that motivation. We share what we're seeing, what we're not seeing, potential other bear sightings, where else could you go and try. So I think on end of day 3, I want to say I was talking to Nate, which was actually having quite a bit of a success in the zone. We actually didn't realize some of our days lined up, I think, together when we were both hunting. We didn't plan it that way. We even discussed maybe linking up potentially, but then just little plans here and there didn't work out. But beside that story, Nate was actually finding quite a bit more bear sign and actual bears than I was. He was sending me scope photos of bears that he's actually seen, and then just more signs. So I was like, dang it, he's all over the bears. So he was nice enough to actually shoot me a pin to an area I've never been to before, as well as photos of some bears he was seeing. And he's like, you should hop over here and hunt. And I want to say the night before, so my day 3 evening, Nate actually saw a bear, shot at a bear, and I want to say missed a bear, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So basically he had an opportunity that didn't pay out. And the next day, for some reason, you couldn't hunt because we actually talked about hunting together.
Yeah, that was the last day of my hunt for that
That's
stretch.
right.
And
Because at this point, I'm like, screw my solo hunting. I need a buddy. Like, it's not as fun as I imagined.
And where was Samong? I was muskie fishing in Minnesota.
That's right. You weren't even town.
Never fishing in August ever again. But I'll eat those words later this year.
Yep.
I'll just say I had a blast during this week sending bear photos to Samong while he was in it.
I was dying in
remember
Minnesota.
that now.
I'm like,
The group
why
text.
am I muskie fishing when I could be killing bears?
Yeah. So as I was crawling there through Onyx, just trying to find new opportunities, because obviously my plan A or B or C at that point was not working out for me. Talking to Nate, I know he missed a bear in that location. He saw a bunch of bear signs, so he actually sent me Onyx pins to the exact area he was hunting. Very kind of you. Not a whole lot of buddies would actually send you pins to the exact spot you're hunting. But basically, I had day 4 and 5 left, so day 4, that night I basically hopped over to, it's a whole new unit basically. It's quite a different area. Similar elevation, I would say, and layout, and similar landscape, just different unit. But it's quite a bit of a drive from where I was hunting. So I hopped over there, I want to say morning of day 4, and then really followed Nate's footsteps from the day prior to that.
Nate basically gave you all the pins of the area where he saw
Exactly.
the bear,
Yep.
where he parked, where he shot from, where he can glass. Because I
Exactly.
remember Nate sent me all that too.
That's
but
right.
I was stuck in
I'm
Minnesota. I
pretty
was
sure
like,
it was a group text where we
I was
all
like,
shared our...
thank you for sending me this,
Yeah.
Nate. There's nothing I can do.
Yep. And I remember that day, that morning, I was feeling a little bit defeated, and then just chatting with you guys the night before, you guys gave me a little boost of confidence that I go to this new area. And I'm sure as a hunter, you guys have all been there, but sometimes just switching location, you get that fresh boost of energy. Like, hey, of course there was no bears in those woods, but these woods, they're everywhere. Like, I don't know,
It's that feeling
something-
of potential opportunity.
Exactly. Like, you haven't looked at these hills for hours yet. Everything just feels new. And in that particular spot, there's just a lot of little niche spots and canyons you can really glass and pick apart. So I love to walk and hunt. Not saying that's the best for my success, because majority of things I've harvested over the years have definitely been by sitting and glassing, not walking and trying to find things. But that's what I just want to do that morning. I just want to kind of get it laid out of the land. So immediately, I think within 5 minutes from leaving the truck, I think I found my first bear scat that was quite large, quite fresh. So everything just kept heading up to this confidence. And then, so basically, I'll just go ahead and fast forward to that evening, because that day was the same. I just continued hiking majority of the morning, did some glassing, spent most of my afternoon calling. I found some deep timber that looked berry, and I just tried my mouth calling again, as well as the fox bro, without much success. And then I found one little outlook that I set in for a while, and then I decided to kind of relocate back somewhat closer to the truck. I was still several miles from it, but just figured sit there till dark, and then if, that way I could just basically be closer to the truck when it does get dark, being by myself in the woods, and it's a little bit rough up there, so I just didn't want to be miles away. And then that last, I want to say 4 to 3 hours before sun would go down, it just got cold up there in those mountains. The weather can change quite a bit. So a bunch of clouds moved in out of nowhere, just started downpouring rain. It was like a thunderstorm. I'm talking about a downpour. It's not just like a little drizzle, like the sky just opened up, dude, and it was just downpouring on me. So I had my first light, pretty much outfit on, like rain pants, rain jacket that I've worn for years in the woods that have kept me pretty dry. I think within an hour, it's practically just soaked it through. Like, I don't know if it was the sweat underneath me, like it was just downpouring. And where I sat exactly, there's quite short vegetation. Like, there's bushes, but it's not like a tree you can hide under. And then basically there was a canyon I was watching. That's actually the same spot that Nate missed that bear the night prior. The pin he sent me, I figured there was a bear feeding here yesterday. Nate was actually he looked in there down before, and he actually saw some berries in there. What are those berries called? I actually still don't know what those berries are. I've never seen it before.
They're called choke cherries.
They're called choke cherries.
So just a little bit of background on this spot. It's an area that is a bunch of kind of miniature draws.
Yep.
And so in the top of the draws, kind of the crest, as you could say, or the ridge was more open, short vegetation, grassy stuff. And then the bottom of these draws were just super thick choke cherries and thick vegetation.
Yep.
And so...
Yeah, and choke cherries, they often grow essentially on the opposite end of the spectrum with huckleberries. Huckleberries, a lot of times you need elevation to find the right huckleberries. Choke cherries, they thrive in lower, more arid climates, which is exactly where you're hunting. It's a lot more rocky.
Yep.
A lot of huckleberries don't thrive in rocky environment. The reason why huckleberries can't be commercially grown is because they're so picky with the type of soil that they need, the amount of sunlight. Everything has to be so perfect for huckleberries to grow. Whereas choke cherries, like, in Eastern Washington, like most of the climate's pretty dry. And so choke cherries you can find pretty much almost anywhere in Eastern Washington as long as you're looking in those lower elevation type dry climates.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there. It's just downpouring. Once again, I'm not really liking my life because I'm getting soaked. Like I wasn't even glassing at this point because if I took my binos out of the harness, they were just like getting soaked. So I wanted to preserve them just in case I did see something so I can verify it. Is this an animal I want to harvest? So I'm like, I'll just keep my binos in the pouch unless I really need them. I had my scope covered up on my rifle, like some other jacket that I brought with me. And this canyon is steep. It actually didn't look like I knew it was steep, but it didn't look as steep until we'll get to the story later and how I found out how steep it is. But look, it's a very steep V-shaped canyon. And as I'm getting to like that last hour of light, the wind really shifted on me. Like I really had this spot. I basically sat in this spot just to favor my wind conditions.
So you originally sat there because the wind was good. It wasn't blowing into the draw or where you were planning to shoot
it was
a bear.
in my face.
But after the rainstorm blew in, like it started.
Yeah, you're just swirling all over the place. And I figured with the thermals, whether it would go up or down the mountain, I was hunting basically where I was facing. Like elevation was to my right or to my left, so I thought I had a spot pretty well picked out. I was wrong, by the way. Like, as always, your plans don't go out. And then to make matters worse, so I'm sitting there like I'm fully soaked. So basically, at this point, I'm thinking this hunt is busted, like it's over. Like, the wind shifted, nothing's going in my favor, it's pouring rain. And I don't know if you guys would agree, but in my experiences, historically, the bears don't like rain and just bad weather as much as nice weather outside. So I'm just thinking, all these mind games are just playing with you. But I told myself, like, I'm not leaving the spot. I'm going to sit here until I can't see anymore or till basically legal shooting time's over. Like, I'm not going to see a bear, but I'm not leaving. I'm just going to sit here. I'm committed. It's just kind of that perseverance. Like, this is my last full day. The next morning I was going to hunt basically till afternoon and go home because it would have been my last day. And then to make matters worse, down this super steep, like, super brushy, impassable canyon, here comes a hunter. And bless his heart, like, I'm glad he's out there doing it. And I got to say, this dude's physical fitness was pretty impressive. Like, I see movement first, and this is a good indicator of, like, look at before you shoot. Because first, like, the vegetation seemed short, but all of a sudden I just see bushes and things moving. And I hear some noise. I'm like, man, that's a bear coming up to feed. There must be the same bear Nate was hunting. But I just think over the years I've taught myself, like, not to even pick up my gun or look through my scope, until I'm confirmed that's an animal. But I'm getting excited. Like, my heart's racing. Like, dude, here comes a bear. Like, it's going to happen. So, like, I moved the coat off my rifle. Like, it's still got scope covers on, so it's probably going to get soaked. Like, a rangefinder, like, I get my rangefinder out, which, by the way, I actually don't have a good rangefinder. Like, to this day, like, I actually have my father-in-law's, like, golfing rangefinder that I use. That's yellow. Like,
Chrome.
That's chrome, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just, like, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And it works great in good weather. When it gets wet, I just don't think it's as ruggedly built as, like, hunting brand, like Vortex rangefinder would be, right? So anyways, I'm sitting there, so I get some spots. I got a few spots ranged, basically, and then my shot would have been well under 200 yards where I believed this bear would pop out. So I'm like, I don't really need a dial at this point. And I know my gun so well, like, I don't even need my cheat sheet. Like, I just knew what to dial it to. I've shot the same rifle, same scope for the last few years. So I'm like, this bear walks out to where I'm planning he's going to walk out like he's a dead bear, right? You make all these plans. And then, like, it gets to the first clearing, and I see a hunter pop out. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Like, this guy's walking up this draw, and it's steep, dude. Like, the fact, I don't know where he came from, because, like, the nearest road below there it's quite a hike.
It's not somewhere you'd expect someone to pop out of, for sure.
Especially, like, majority of people, they'll walk those abandoned logging roads up there or something in eastern Washington. They're not just going up and down draws. So, first of all, I'm, like, impressed this guy can make it up this mountain. Second of all, I'm even more pissed now. I'm like, this hunt's done. Like, there's no more bears left. There's nothing. Like, this guy's literally walking through the exact spot I was hoping. He's walking through those berries, like, checking them out. But, so I was pretty defeated. I'm like, it's over. So I, like, kick back. And I don't know if I was texting you guys at this point, but I'm, like, getting my phone. I'm texting my dad. I'm texting you guys. I was like, this sucks.
You were giving me live updates as the hunt was going down. That's right,
yeah.
Yes.
Another thing, I'm going to fast forward later when I dropped into that draw. Obviously, we already know I harvested a bear. Mm-hmm. So there's so many tunnels in there. Like, the grass seemed short when you're glassing, which is another good point to bring up when you're glassing these areas. Vegetation is way taller and higher than you likely think it is. Like, these bears are not very tall animals. Like, your average bear is not as huge, I guess. Every time I do see a bear in a while, like, they're not as big. Some bears I've shot are pretty big, but, like, they're not as big as what you, like, before I hunted bears, what I imagined a bear would be like in the landscape. Like, if you look at your average lab, they're 100 pounds. You know, like
Bears-
my lab's over 100 pounds. He's not that big, and if you put him in some brushy, hilly area, like you're not going to see him. Bears might be bulkier, but they're not that much taller.
I think people don't give bears enough credit for how nimble they can be. Like, you can
Nimble?
have a giant bear, but like if you give him a little tunnel because that's his only route to escape, he will blow through
Yeah.
that like nothing.
And they're also very intelligent animals. Like they just know how to navigate their terrain. They can be very quiet. They can be loud. You know.
Yeah.
So I lost my train of thought again.
He came hiking up the canyon.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at this point, I'm like, I'm feeling pretty defeated. I was like, it's not gonna happen. But I'm like, I'm gonna stay here till dark. Like I'm not giving up. This is the spot. At this point, it just makes no sense of relocating. I'm just gonna sit here and see what happens. So I'm sitting there pretty much defeated. It starts raining again. Then out of the corner of my eye, basically I see some black light come out of this bush that was like in front of me for maybe 150 yards the whole
And
time.
so, where is this bear coming, or this black blob? Where is this black blob coming out of relative to where you saw the hunter come out?
I think he must have walked within 50 to 80 yards of this bear.
So at this
Never
point,
known.
the hunter's already out of the area.
Yep, he basically hiked up. I have no idea where he went. Actually, I did. He basically hunted off because he came back after I harvested the bear. We actually had a chat. He was quite irritated that he's like, did I just seriously walk by that bear? It was like pretty damn close. But I knew the area was safe because I saw this guy walk in for another 30 minutes. Like I knew well up a mountain. There was basically a logging road up there. I saw him hop on it and walk away. So I knew like he was nowhere near the vicinity I was hunting anymore. But I just didn't think once his scent was down there and him busting through that brush, anything would be left down there. But anyway, so I'm sitting there and then I see just like something black out of the corner of my eye kind of. And I'm like, no way, is that a bear? Like, why is there a bear here at this point? Like, because you expect him 2 feet in from somewhere. Like, he was bedded here in this little bush the whole time that he just comes out. So I dig my binos out. You know, my hands start shaking. I start breathing faster. I throw my binos up, and sure enough, this is like a bear. At this point, I'm so paranoid with potentially a hunter walking through there. Like, I knew it was a bear. Like, I've identified it, but I had to double check like 5 times. I was like, yeah, this is definitely a black bear in front of me. And then he kind of goes back in the bush, like right back where he came. So that's when I texted you guys. I was like, dude, I have a bear like 150 yards in front of me.
And I was like, Steve, what are you doing texting us?
Right? Well, I didn't have a shot at him. So anyways, like the area's already ranged. I get set up on my rifle. I'll lay down behind the gun. I'm like, if he pops out and gives me a shot, like I'm going to take him. And then it was like probably 15, 20 minutes. He just like, I could see him feeding. The bushes are just going crazy because he's in there. And I would see his butt come out, but he just would not poke out of that bush. Now the bush, there's a couple of clearings next to it. But if he went away from me, it's just a bunch more thick bushes. So if he takes that route, I'll never get a clear shot of him. So I knew that. So it seemed like a lot more than 15 minutes to me. I was just sitting there. I'm like, oh, he's not, is he going to come out? Is he not going to come out?
I think that feeling when you're sitting in the moment and you're like, your shot opportunities are so slim if the animal takes a different route, that feeling, I think most hunters can relate to it. But for anybody who doesn't hunt or who's never been in a situation where they're just waiting for an animal to walk out, that feeling is one of the most dreadful feelings in the world.
It's horrible.
Because you're just like, I just need him to walk here and
Yeah.
he won't do it. What if he goes over there? What if he goes that way?
Yeah.
Nate and I have sat on animals many times in the past like 4 years where we're just like, we need this animal to do something, but we don't know if he is. And we sit there for like half an hour, up to 3.5 hours sometimes.
Yeah. It's
You know?
this feeling of like, you're like, everything is almost lining up. You're like you've almost made that the thing that needs to happen.
Yep.
But if whatever animal it is, in your case, if this bear decides to take a right to those berry bushes instead of a left, you're hosed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. And that's one of those situations where that definitely was applicable. And I wish, like, now I want to, in this podcast, want to make myself sound like the super ethical hunter that just sit there and waited patiently. Like, if we're being honest, like, I had so many opportunities to, like, shoot him in the butt or something. And, dude, it was, like, every inch of me wanted to. And it was so close to me just, like, taking a sketchy shot, but I didn't.
To remind the viewers, it's like, or listeners, it's like, this is day 4 for you after just getting whooped, right?
Exactly.
And like, finally,
It's
you're
like-
in that position where you're like, I'm 99% there.
Yep.
And I just need this bear to do the 1%.
Exactly.
I just want it to happen so bad. So everybody's been there.
Yeah. But anyways, I'm just sitting there laying, being patient. And then at some point, he does actually step out. He was angled away from me. It was not a good angle. Like, my hand was on the trigger, and I have a multi-step trigger. Like, I had it halfway squeezed, and like some inner deep voice in me just like, don't shoot. And I remember like, check the bubble on my scope and check my muzzle, because that tall grass. And I looked down at my rifle, and there's this thick piece of grass sticking up like right in front of my muzzle. And I was like, screw it, Steve, just shoot right through it. And I was like, you cannot do that. So I have to like get off my rifle, reach down there. You're trying to get this piece of grass down. So as I'm doing it, I'm trying, and this is like 150 yards. He definitely hears me. And in my experience, their noses are incredible. So and I knew with the way the wind was swirling, like it's a matter of time he sniffs me and smells me. Like I have no idea how he didn't, honestly. Once again, this is not a credit to me as a hunter in this location. It was just kind of luck on the wind part because I'm like, the wind kept changing every direction. So it's a matter of time till it goes towards the bear. So that was kind of pushing me, to make the shot because I was like, I don't have all day here. And it's getting dark. Like every clock's running out possibly. So then I go down there. I'm moving the grass. And I don't know if it was the grass sound or what, and I definitely felt the wind shift behind me. Like the bear definitely started looking my direction. But that action gave me like a perfect Broadway shot. Like he actually came out of the bush completely to just look at me, get a good look of what was up there. And I was really well hidden, I think, in the spot I was sitting. And anyways, I got a perfect broad shot basically on him. Being the only shooter, I didn't have a camera on him. I shot, I had no idea, once again, you're not super confident where you hit him. It felt like a good shot. I was dead steady on my rifle. I didn't see the impact in my scope. I think I did jump the gun just a little bit. I usually am really good about being steady on that scope. I have a muzzle brake. It really doesn't kick, but I don't know if it's the conditions. If my bipod slipped a little bit, I never saw the impact, basically.
I remember you texted me, and you texted me, you're like, I think I hit the bear because he started tumbling, but you were like, right before the gun went off, my bipod slipped and the gun went off. And that's why you were like, I don't know. Like, I hit the bear, but I don't know if it's a good shot.
So basically, just to give you guys, maybe listeners can relate to these conditions, but you're in kind of this wooded / deserty terrain up there in eastern Washington, where once the mud is wet, it's really, really slick, especially on all those cliffy rocks. So basically, like everything, we're just slipping, and you're fighting to keep your body from slipping, so it kind of can mess with your body mechanics as you're trying to make the shot. So I had my bipod, and I think, and I know I replayed this, you're always doubting yourself. Until I find an animal, I'm never really 100% sure I got it. But I can't, to this day, I don't know if it was right before I shot. Did my bipod slip and those rocks or the recoil of the gun made it slip? But it definitely had a slip right when I shot. So that was just gave me extra doubt. The bear definitely looked like he was hit. Like, how he does that humping, like one leg went up. So it looked like a vital shot. And he just started rolling. And then I knew it was steep, but I didn't realize how steep it was. I kept following with my binos, dude, and he's just picking up speed. I'm like, oh, God, like I'm by myself, and this is a steep canyon. And that thing just went all the way down, dude. As you know, it's like we talked about that thicker brush, and then down there it gets like thicker at the bottom. Like he just rolled right into that stuff. And that point, like I had no idea. Like, did he run when he entered that brush? Did he die right there? And I did think like it was faint, but I believe I heard a death moan, which those of you that don't know, something bears will do. Not every time, but something they're prone to doing is if you vitally shoot them somewhere that doesn't involve the central nervous system, usually vital organs, they do typically die from a hypovolemic shock.
They don't die immediately, but so they have time to moan, and they die. And it's not just black bears. I've heard elk death moan, like
really?
A lot of animals, but it's just more common in black bears that if they have time to death moan, because the bear I shot last year, I mean, that bear death moan.
The bear I shot last year death moan too.
Yeah, so all three of the bears we shot last year death moan. And in this situation, for those of you who don't know what a death moan is, it's basically just a bear making this loud sound. And that is a perfect indicator that bear is fatally hit.
Yeah.
That bear is dying.
Yeah, most biologists will tell you it's basically when they enter a form of hypovolemic shock, basically from blood loss. It's their kind of last reaction to it. Their body does it, just like their final act. But anyways, I heard this kind of a death moan at the bottom, so that was a good confidence booster. Like, hey, he's probably down. I think I called you pretty much right away.
Yeah, you were like, what does a death moan mean? I'm like, bro, if you heard him death moan, he's dead.
I think I knew what it meant. I was doubting whether I heard it or
not.
I was like, I might have hit him. He might have death mode. I don't know. And it's really thick down there. And I knew I shouldn't bust down there and look at him, but that's what I really wanted to do. So I think I just needed a buddy to tell me, like, Steve, you need to give this bear half an hour or something to cool off.
The moment you called me, I just got home from the airport, and I'm like, Steve, I'll be up there in like 2 hours. Give me 2.5 hours, I'll be up there.
Yeah.
And Steve's like, no, like let me go confirm like he's actually dead and whatnot, and then go on.
Yeah. And I can't remember. I think definitely text message to you. I don't remember if we talked on it. You were in the middle of something, I think.
Yeah.
Doesn't really matter to the story. So anyways, I give him some time. I was patient. Probably gave him 30 to 45 minutes. At this point, I barely had any light left, so I was like, I want to try and go down there while there's some light left. Reminded myself, I do a fair share of backcountry adventures where it's fly fishing or hunting, and I really knew I should invest in a better headlamp. I did not. I had a pretty cheap Amazon headlamp that's got me through quite a bit of adventures, but it was something I knew wasn't a great product. It was not a good headlamp, and as soon as I start like heading down this canyon, which is now I'm learning it's way steeper. I kind of start realizing why the bear was rolling so much. Like my feet are slipping. Like it's a lot harder to navigate down there than you think with very limited lighting. My headlamp dies. So I'm thinking, oh man, my battery's dead. It's cool. I got more batteries in my pack. So I'm like, I'm going to use my iPhone to basically navigate. And again, you're excited. You're walking fast. You're tripping. So I remember telling myself, like, you need to slow down. You're going to hurt your ankle out here. It's not going to end well. But you guys know how it is. You think you have an animal down. It's like a very exciting, like.
Yeah, it's a rush.
One of the reasons we do this, it's like finally it's all coming together. Like, I just want to confirm he's down there. So I'm booking it down this mountain. Pretty much don't have a headlamp. But I was confident. I was like, when I get to the bear, like I have spare batteries in my backpack, I'll just throw them in. And as I'm going through this brush, like things are hitting me in the face, branches are hitting me, everything's soaking wet. I've worn contacts and glasses, as you guys know, for probably well over a decade now. One of the branches, this never happened to me before, but somehow a branch just nails me in the face, basically, and a bunch of debris gets into my eye. So I'm trying to, and my eye is hurting, so I'm like trying to get it out, kind of like when you have eyelash in there. Well, somehow I pop my contact out. I don't have a spare contact, so now I'm missing a contact in my left eye. Like I cannot see worth a shit, if you guys know me at all, without my contacts. So I'm like, and that just shows you, like, if you guys are listening, when you are in these situations, like, it's so easy to get excited and focused, and this story could have had a way worse ending, compared to, like, I mean, you can fall, you can cut yourself with a knife when you get to butchering. Like, this is really important to, like, this bear's not going anywhere at this point, you guys. The hunt's over. Like, just take your time, be safe about it. I wish I took my own advice. So, long story short, I discovered the bear. I found it's a heck of a blood trail, dude. Like, he did not take a tracker to find it.
And what are you shooting?
I have a 6.5 Creedmoor. I know some of you listeners are going to love that answer, but
Hey.
This is my first, like, really nice gun. This is the only gun I have. I don't have as nice of setups as some of these other fellas here do, but I want to say it's a Savage 110 Ultralight.
Yep.
If you take a step back to last week's podcast, all about rifles, Steve is a perfect testament to accuracy kills.
So long story short, I go down there, find a bear. He's dead, definitely. So all the emotions hit, all the excitement. I mean, this is pretty much where the story, I think, plateaus. But at this point, I'm deep in the woods and I don't have light. Anyway, so I go through my backpack. I did find a spare batteries, plug them in the flashlight with my iPhone light. It's like the actual headlamp's broken. So I have no lights out there. I'm missing contact. I was like, me skinning and gutting this bear right now is probably not going to end well. It was definitely cold enough. I mean, it was like we just talked about how it can be in August in our area, but that day with the rain and the storm moving in, like it got a lot chillier really quickly in the mountains. So I figured like the best course of action would be to just go back to the truck, basically reconfigure, go get a new headlamp, go get myself a new contact, and then just come back super early the next morning is what I did. I mean, I maybe slept 2 hours and then went right back out there, recovered the bear. The next day, I had to do multiple trips up the mountain with him just because of how steep and rough it is, and just didn't want to hurt myself.
If you had to field judge the bear, how heavy do you think that bear is on its live paws?
Man, it's hard to say. I want to say 150 pounds.
Yeah, like a pretty average, good bear.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I don't want to say he was a monster. He's definitely not the biggest bear I've killed. I mean, this is a bear, and to listeners, like, I'm a pretty easygoing hunter. Like, I obviously would love to kill the biggest white-tailed buck out there or the biggest bear I've ever seen, but I will usually take any opportunity at a legal animal that's, making me impressive. You guys know I have passed on some really tiny bears. So if I see a bear and I'm just like, wow, that's a baby bear, like I'll pass it out. But if it's a good representation of what we have here in Washington, I pretty much harvest it. Depending on the year too, I think the year previous. So kind of.
Your standards kind of went down over the years.
Yeah. So 2 years prior, I killed a giant bear here in Washington. No, not 2 years.
2021.
2021, which was the last year we could hunt spring bear. I got definitely the biggest bear in my life. I mean, that thing's a monster.
I mean,
Probably the biggest bear the three of us will ever see
I
killed.
had to be honest, like, if Steve entered his bear that he shot in spring of 2021 here in Washington into the record books, he'd make record books.
Yeah, that was a nice bear.
Steve Steve hasn't put him in the record books because Steve kind of broke his skull.
Yeah.
Steve kind of shot him at 50 yards in the head
face.
as he was coming at him.
That is a true story. It's on video if you guys want to see it. It's on my channel.
Yeah, that video is live. So 2021, the final year that Washington had spring bears, Steve shot a monster, like a beautiful spring bear.
Yep.
And unfortunately, we will never know his official score because Steve literally blew his head in half.
Yeah.
But if he had his skull intact, put him in the record books, he'd be up there.
Yeah.
Easily.
And by no means do I encourage headshots in any animals, you guys. I just want to throw it out there. This was just a unique opportunity where it was a incredibly he was basically, he came out and faced me at a very short distance.
And that's the only shot you had.
That's the only shot I had. I was dead steady. Like, I took it. To this day, I don't know if it was the right thing to do or not. I mean, he went down. It's on video, like he dropped. So,
Yeah.
But once you shoot a bear in the head, they will not officially score because they
No.
say the skull is ruined now.
Exactly.
And it did. It shattered a couple bones that they used. So we kind of pieced it back together with some super glue. We unofficially scored it. Like, I just measured it out of curiosity, but you can't enter it anywhere. Like, super glued skull, they're like, not happening.
What was your estimate that you rough scored him at? Do you remember?
I can't remember now. Yeah.
Did he break 20? I'm pretty sure he broke 20.
He broke 20, yeah.
Yeah.
I want to say it was between 20 and 22 inches. I can't remember the exact. I can't remember the exact. And
Just
the thing
a casual
is
20, 22
Yeah.
inches.
yeah. But the lengthwise was intact. It's the width that was basically the.
He broke his arches.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The
So,
arch
so
was
how
broken.
bears are scored with their skull is you have, essentially it's like a cross, where it's like you go from like the tip of the nose or whatever it is to like some part on top of their skull, and then you also measure across the forehead essentially. And that's how you get a score of a bear.
Yeah, you could just, if you have skulls at home, you can do it yourself by basically taking two books or two things that you can get level and pushing those books up against the front and the back of the bear and measuring that inside distance and then doing it the same on the widest point on the skull of the bear.
Yeah. So that's what
Exactly.
we're saying when we're like, 20 to 22
Yeah.
inches. Like, if you kill a bear that's over 20 inches, like, that's a big bear.
A black bear.
A black bear.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep, it was a nice bear. So, anyways, like obviously, I would love to shoot a bear like that again. But any opportunity that I see at a decent animal, I'm probably going to take it.
In 2024, you had limited time. You
Yep.
were running out of time. Like, this was like the
Exactly.
day before you had to stop hunting, and you were soaking wet, haven't seen much. You
Yep.
saw like an average 150
Exactly.
pound bear, and
It was a no.
got you excited and you
Yep,
shot him.
Absolutely, and I was very excited. I was stoked. I mean, I'm still stoked talking about the story right now. But,
Yeah.
And then that night, like another, and I love bear meat. So another reason is like I will harvest a bear, and we're lucky here we can get 2 bear tags in the fall. So the first bear, it's usually like fill your freezer, and then if you have time, you can spend some time getting the bear you really want if that's your goal.
Mm-hmm.
And my family, we really love bear meat. My daughter, she's almost 2. She eats bear meat. She's pretty much grown up on bear meat. So just make sure you guys cook it well. But we love bear meat in the family.
That's awesome.
Whether it's we make a lot of things out of it. So it's something that I'm actually like pressured to get now because my wife's like, when I go deer hunting, she's like, good luck. But if I'm going bear hunting, she's like, we need bear meat, dude. Like,
Yeah.
make it count. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So it's something we really look forward to. And then the next morning, I think I talked about the evening a little bit, just being soaking wet. Like, guys, I was like soaked through my core. Like, everything was wet, no contact. Like, I wasn't in the greatest moods. Like, obviously, getting the harvest was the peak of that experience. Like, once that happened, like, nothing mattered anymore. I didn't care that I was wet. I didn't care how soaked I was. Remember when I did get back to the truck, I was like shivering. I was like, oh, yeah, I'm cold. Like, you don't even remember at that point. It's so exciting. But the next day was actually kind of cool because my whole some of my family members basically went up with me to recover the bear. We kind of made a little family event out of it. It was pretty neat.
That's awesome.
Thankfully, we got a really, really early head start because something you guys might have experienced if you hunted anything in August, I guess, is you get swarmed with yellow jackets here in Washington.
And especially last year.
Yeah, and last year was one of the worst years by far of experience. And I mean, when I say we got swarmed that morning, is me and my dad were breaking out this bear, and then he was nice enough. My dad has always been there for me. Like, he doesn't really even hunt himself. Like, he'll come with me, but if I ever harvest an animal, like, he'll be there. Like, he'll drop whatever he's doing, which I'm super thankful for. He's always out there. Like, I have countless stories of him pretty much saving my butt. He's always mad at me. He's like, why'd you have to shoot it down here? But he's always there for me, so I'm thankful. But, I mean, we almost left the hide because basically we took the hide off. We packed out the rest of the meat. I came back for the hide, and it must have had, I don't want to lie, hundreds of yellow jackets.
Oh.
Like, the hide looked yellow.
Oh.
Like, they're just in there picking off. And the amount of meat they picked off, because I left it upside down, the fur was to the ground so that it can, like, kind of dry and put in the shade. I mean, it was just packed with yellow jackets. And then they cleaned it up so well. Like, like if you went through there with a knife.
They fleshed it for you.
They practically did, yeah. So
We're going to take that to Elusive Creatures. Adam over
Yeah,
at the shop,
just
give him
find a
his
bunch of-
method.
Raise a bunch of yellow jackets
Yeah.
and have them flesh for you.
yeah, so my dad's like, you don't need this hide, just leave it here. And I was like, I'm taking my hide. Like, if I get stung, I get stung. So I went over there, just shook it and ran, basically. And I didn't get stung at all. Like, not one of them.
I would have loved to see
And
that.
I was like swarmed. I mean, once I shook it, I was just hundreds of yellow jackets. And I'm just like closing my eyes and bracing for stinging. And I kept running. And like, I just didn't feel any stings. And yeah, I just got away with, they just.
Later on, 3 hours, Steve gets home. He just has like 20 bee stings on his
Right.
back. Just never
Yeah.
felt a single one
Yeah,
of them.
yeah,
Adrenaline.
just ticks.
I mean, that's just a heck of a story. I think that that we could also probably do a whole podcast on solo hunting and mental fortitude.
Absolutely. None of my hunt, I think, is extraordinary in any type of way. Like
No,
I
I think you just depicted a very real experience of what a lot of us go through.
Absolutely.
But all that aside, let's talk some August bear hunting here. You had an experience there that had some really stereotypical conditions and experiences for bear hunting in August.
Yep.
And I think that's kind of what we want to go through today a bit.
Yep.
Yeah. The first and foremost that a lot of people, especially newer hunters for bear hunting, will always hear is if you find the food, you find the bears. And there's a lot of merit to that. It's true. If you don't find what the food that the bears are eating on, you're probably not going to find the bears. Because bears are an animal. I mean, everybody needs to eat to survive, but bears literally 24/7, their mind is food.
That is how they are wired.
That's how bears live, literally. And so why we touched on food sources throughout Steve's story is because that's the emphasis that we want to put on. So primarily here in Washington, and more specifically Northeast Washington, you could talk the Cascades as well. Huckleberries are what most people, at least I generally strive towards, because when there are multiple food sources, like let's say there's huckleberries and there's elderberries and all these other berries, if you have this entire buffet of choices, more times than not, you will find more berries on the huckleberry patch than elderberry patches or chokecherry patches.
Yep.
And I think that, I'm not a scientist or a biologist, but I just feel like bears have a better tongue for huckleberries. They prefer huckleberries over pretty much all the other berry sources if there's huckleberries present in the region that you're hunting bears in. Now, the thing that I want to split is kind of like you hunted your bear over chokecherries.
Yep.
There's a difference of why you would hunt over chokecherries and why you would hunt over huckleberries.
Absolutely.
As I briefly mentioned it when we were going through the huckleberries, every year it's so different. You can have a huckleberry patch on this one particular mountain that is just thriving in 2024.
Exactly.
You could go back there this year, 2025, and it's just a complete desert.
Yep.
There's still the bushes, but the huckleberries are not in.
Yep.
And so what I often consider these types of situations is I call them microclimates. Here in the region, we have these microclimates where, for whatever reason, the same south-facing slope on Mountain A at the same elevation as Mountain B is thriving with huckleberries. Take the same exact conditions in terms of elevation, topography on Mountain B, and it's non-existent.
Exactly.
So that's why I feel like that's a difficult challenge that we all face year to year of trying to find the bears, because like many times we get so humbled. We're like, oh, we got it dialed this year. We're going to go back and we're going to go kill bears. We show up there, desert.
Dead. Yep.
And we're like, okay, well, now we got to start again, start at ground zero. And then you're constantly doing this just cat and mouse game of where's the next good huckleberry source. Now, the advantage of having multiple berry sources is sometimes there's just not a good huckleberry year. 2024 was probably one of the worst years I've ever seen with huckleberries. Huckleberries generally, depending on where you hunt and depending on how the season goes, but generally speaking, huckleberries thrive either, they start thriving in like middle to late July, but they really peak in like the middle of August. Hardly ever do you ever see like super ripe berries like first week of August, which is exactly what I shot my bear last year in 6,000 feet elevation, prime huckleberries, August 1st. Threw all of us off. Even Jeff and them, who have spent many years hunting in the Cascades, we're like, why is this bear at 6,000 feet? Because prior to going up there, we're like, it makes no sense why the bear is so high, because that's usually where you find them late August and even to like first week of September. Because generally speaking, the lower the elevation, like 4,000 feet, huckleberries start there. And then as the season progresses, you start going to fall. The elevation starts going higher and higher because that's where the berries start to ripen up. Last year, it was not the case. So basically, we had a first week of good berries. And then after that, huckleberries were basically non-existent, at least from my experience. And so I did a hunt in a different region for my second bear tag after I killed mine August 1st last year, where this area is known for huckleberries. And I went up there, didn't find good huckleberries, saw no bear sign. We saw a bear driving on the side of the road on the highway the first day as we were driving in. We went in there. It was desert. We spent 4 days in there. And I'm like, I don't even know how to find these bears anymore. You went in there like day 2 or whatever on your trip. And then you said you saw a bear for like a glimpse.
Yeah.
Just kind of running through a burn.
Yep.
But it wasn't even huckleberries. It was just a bear cruising through a burn.
He's just running through.
And then obviously with that, kind of just going back and forth, I told Steve, I was like, you got to start hunting other sources than the huckleberries because that food source is not there this year. Like you got to start focusing on other places. Obviously, just knowing multiple food sources in this case, choke cherries were in at that time and shifting from, oh, I'm going to go from huckleberries to now I'm going to focus on choke cherries or some other food source that is more abundant and reliable at that time. It paid off for you. And that's the reason why I think it's so important as a bear hunter to have not only just what most people are catering to, but also have these backup plans and also just know what these bears are eating. Because most of the time, in this example, choke cherries and huckleberries, they will kind of be ripe at the same time of the year. Choke cherries are often more in like bottom type elevation, like really low, like 2,000 feet, 3,000 feet, super dry, just arid climates, yellow grass type environments. Huckleberries, I mean, you can find them in the alpine, like 6,000 feet, where it's got a little bit more moisture. It's a little bit colder, generally speaking, and it's not as dry as choke cherries. But you can have that because you will have bears that are always on choke cherries, and you have bears that are always on huckleberries. But when one of those food sources is not available, you have this giant shift of all the bears going to that one food source that is available, or vice versa. In this case, you missed a bear on choke cherries. He went in the day after, shot a different bear in essentially the same patch of choke cherries. And everywhere that we have hunted prior for the past 5 years in August, where we've killed them over huckleberries or we've seen them over huckleberries, non-existent.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing with bears being so food oriented. One thing that can play significantly to your advantage with bear hunting, but also to your disadvantage if for whatever reason that year there is a plethora of food sources. So one thing that we experienced last year as well is when we found this is pointing kind of to that microclimate thing that you're talking about. Where I shot my bear, for whatever reason, that drainage had berries from the very bottom of the drainage at like 3,800 feet to the top ridge, which was almost 7,000 feet. I mean, this was a mountain, and I had hiked from the bottom to that top ridge throughout that week and found berries at all those elevations, and that checked out when we saw bears. We saw bears moving within an hour, within 2 hours, within 45 minutes from the very bottom of these drainages, cresting up over the ridge, going to the next drainage. So it's one thing that's great if you can find a microclimate that is hosting a food source really well. You can find a really ripe area of huckleberries. You can find a couple draws that are really lush with choke cherries because bears will concentrate to the food sources. Now, if that food source is you have a hillside where the huckleberries are going on at the same time as the choke cherries, going on at the same time as the elderberries in the bottoms, it's along the same lines as spring bear hunting on grasses when you have a poor snow year. Like looking back at this last year, you have like an early melt and you can have grasses growing over thousands of feet of elevation instead of these little pockets that concentrate the animals.
That's a different broadcast too, but there's different type of green grass too.
The reason why I'm talking specifically of berries is because I think for the vast majority of people, that's the food source that we're focusing on because that's simply the most abundant. Obviously, there's always going to be other food sources that bears can eat in August. But again, my point I'm making is bears, just like humans, we have a taste preference. There's certain food that we would prefer to eat all the time over things that we'll eat occasionally. If somebody gave you a steak that you just love and somebody gave you some other food that you're not really fond of, you're most likely always going to choose the steak, right? Same thing with bears. If you gave bears huckleberries and like a choke cherry, most of the time bears will cater towards huckleberries. Now, just to fast forward a little bit, there are times where elderberries come in right at the 1st of September and huckleberries are slowly
Fading
they're fading out, but they kind of have this middle ground where they're both like priming out, where you have both sources. During those times, like first week of September, every patch of huckleberry bushes that you see is cleared out. They're grubbing. It's because these bears, they know the elderberries are around, but they're just going around trying to find these huckleberries that they would rather consume. And then when huckleberries are completely gone, that's when they'll start resorting to these second-tier options that, in this case, I'm giving the example of elderberries, because late in September, I've seen bears just cruise right past elderberries. And you're talking about elderberries that are like overly abundant, like just dropping off the side of the root or the tree. And the bears just don't care about it.
Yeah.
And then the moment they find a little huckleberry bush, even if there's only like 6 berries, stop and munch and then just move on. So the point is, there's a tier list of food sources that bears prefer. And huckleberries, and you can argue blueberries, but those are like top. And those are typically what we like to hunt in, because where huckleberries are, that's typically the environment that I find myself I want to hunt in. I want to hunt in the high country where it's
cooler.
beautiful,
Yep.
and you can really be isolated. You can hike miles in there, and just the whole environment, it's just what I want to do. Whereas on the other side, if that doesn't pan out, it's like, okay, now I got to go hunt some places where I might not really call my first priority. Like, I don't want to go sit, compared to like the high country, I don't want to go sit somewhere where it's just really rocky, grasshoppers jumping everywhere and just getting beat by the sun because it's so hot where I'm hunting. But sometimes you have to do that if you actually want to kill a bear, if your first priority isn't being productive, right? Yeah. And so food sources, that's what we aim for August. Blueberries, huckleberries, in this case, sometimes choke cherries. What are some other food sources that bears may be consuming in August that I have not touched? I've touched on the main ones, but there are so many food sources out there that they can still eat.
Yeah, there's also rose hips.
There's elderberries.
There's elderberries. There's
about
rose hips. Although rose hips tend to play more of a role in late season once the first frost has come and their sugar content increases. And then outside of berries, there is prey, because bears are also predators. They're omnivores. They eat the berries. Now, a lot of times, because of, we were talking August bear hunting, this is not as much of a focus. This is more of a late season tactic. In August, because there is usually an abundance of berries, that's where bears will gravitate towards. It's less work, it's less energy expenditure for them.
Exactly.
Berries aren't going to run away from them.
Most scientists and biologists will agree. I don't have personal experience harvesting bears by calling, but reading bear literature and just biology reports and bears' diets, I think later on the fall, meat becomes quite a priority for them. So if you are looking at those later dates, September, October, that's where I would shift my attention to calling. But I think majority of bears I've seen.
I'm emphasizing so much on berries in August is because if you just take a calendar, start from January through December, different months out of the year will have bears prioritizing a certain food source. It's just that in August, it's just berries. Whereas in like May, in like springtime, their primary food sources are like kind of like what you talked about, like some type of plant or grasses. Skunk cabbage, for example, when the skunk cabbage first grow in, bears love those, like the first sprout of skunk cabbage, essentially. Not only that, also fawns and calves. That's when fawn, baby deer, and baby elk are dropping, and they're just sitting on the ground hoping that a bear doesn't pick up their scent. And so if we were talking about May, I mean, our conversation would be completely different because there's no berries at that time.
Right.
But it's just that because this podcast is about August, early season fall bear hunting, berries are where it's at. You're always going to have like dead logs where it might be full of termites or whatnot, but that's not really a priority in August. That's just kind of like a back thing now, because bears can always go dig up a log whenever they want to, but berries are in and out. So it's like once they're in, you better grub on it, and once they're out, then you can go off and do whatever you want. So that's the first thing we're going to talk about is just food source.
Absolutely.
Berries, that's where it's at.
Can't argue with berries.
The other one is obviously water. Here in Washington, we have so much water sources. It's not really a thing where like, it's not something we have to worry about it, because almost every little drainage or every main drainage is going to have some type of water, whether it's a giant creek or just a little bit of a flowing trickle off, or sometimes you have like these random ponds or lakes up in these mountains. Water is usually not really an issue here, which is why it's hard to find a spot based off of a water source because it's so abundant.
Exactly.
Whereas if you're hunting bears in like the desert where water sources are now really scarce, you can use that to your advantage to be like, that's a water source that I want to sit over because I know that within a certain radius, any bears that's living in this region has to use this as the only water source to drink. Everything drinks water, right? But again, because we're still trying to focus in more towards like Washington, the Pacific Northwest type area, water is not really an issue, which is why we're not really putting an emphasis on finding water sources.
One thing we have in abundance up here is water. I mean, this particular spot where there's bear was harvested, every one of those drainages had its own creek.
And you were hunting in some of the driest climates that you can find in eastern Washington. And even those in late summer, August,
had water
still had water running.
Yeah.
Right? And so water sources, you have them everywhere here, but that's a little thing I want to touch on. The third thing that we want to touch on is obviously cover. Black bears, even though they're a predator, they still don't necessarily sit at the top of the food chain. They still have a sense of urgency to hide to survive, right? And so sometimes it's to hide from other predators, bigger predators. Like here in Northeast Washington, we do have a population of grizzly bears. Grizzly bears will...
Bigger black bears.
And then obviously their own kind. A bigger black bear will oftentimes kill a smaller black bear. So these smaller bears, if they're not the dominant bear in the area, they want to hide so that they literally don't get killed. And so a lot of times when we hunt, I mean, you kind of touched on earlier when you were talking about how thick that area was. And like you saw him come out of one little bush and you never even saw him. Like he was just sitting in that one bush. And so it's like they have this cover because they want to be able to, especially in the summer, to be able to hide out of the sun. I mean, the sun's like 90 degrees, sometimes 100 degrees, right? There's not a lot of shade cover in these instances, so they want cover so that they can just not overheat. Second, it's obviously for a predatory type reasoning where they just don't want to die from a bigger black bear or, in this case, hunters. Third is that's just what these black bears do. And so, like, where your bear came out of, he was probably there, I don't know, many years until you went and shot him. Obviously, when you guys went in there, especially Nate too, when he was trying to find the bear that he shot at, it's like when you guys got in there were so many tunnels, so many different routes that the bears could just go in, and you would have no idea where they would have gone. So cover, that's obviously one of the things that I wanted to touch on. And again, I'm being very surface level here because it's such a rabbit hole in and of itself, but we're just trying to give some like rapid fire type advice here. That's kind of what I have. You guys have anything to add on?
The only thing I would add on is taking a step back to water. One of the things that can be productive. This has been for me more productive as far as trail cams. I haven't actually sat and hunted bears as like a ambush method with this, but I have cell cameras on wallows throughout this area of the state, and bears hit those wallows in August, especially when it's hot, to cool off. And I have videos of bears literally rolling around, laying down, splashing, playing in the wallows to cool off during those really hot August days. It's a water source. It cools them because, like you were saying, if it's 100 degrees out, that bear's wearing a thick, dark coat. You know, it's a hot environment.
Yeah, that's
a
great point because that's the other thing too. Is like wallows are a solid foundation to hunt bears, and obviously a lot of times when you find a wallow is in a very secluded area where it's oftentimes in dark timber where there's really not a food source around, but it's just simply that there's a wallow there. And I have a trail cam, and there's this wallow where I've been elk hunting for many years now, where I leave the trail cams there year round because I just want to know what comes through. And leaving it from January through December every year for like the past 6 years, the number one animal I get that hit the wallow is black bears.
Yeah,
interesting.
There's more black bears that hit it than moose, than elk and deer combined.
And I found some quite interesting swampy ponds up in the northeastern Washington. One of the biggest ones I found was actually spring bear hunting, where it was just I stumbled up on a unique pond in the middle of nowhere, just duck timber, and there was more bear sign in that one location than probably I've ever seen in one spot.
Yeah,
there was bear track in the mud. There was bear scat all over the place. I don't have a trail cam or anything to prove that but the amount of sign there was quite incredible.
Yeah, wallows. That's a good point, and I'm glad you brought it up.
I got 1 point at the very end.
in terms of hunting bears, that's really all it is. There's a food source, and like 80% of the emphasis that I'm going to put on food source is berries in August. Obviously, the other 20%, I mean, they can eat tree bark, dig for termites, do all that stuff. But like 80% of berry kills, if I had to guess in August, come from some type of berry source, whether they are literally shot in the berry source or if people are calling around a berry source because they know that the bears are funneled around the berry source somewhere. And then obviously water, we touched on it. There's so much water here. It's not really a concern, but if you have a wallow like Nate brought up, it's also a good point because many times my wallow that I just leave and I purposely leave it there for elk hunting in September. In August, like August 1st through August 31st, man, some of the bears that roll through are like tanks. Megas. And I'm just like, if I sat at that wall, I would have shot like a legit 350-pound black bear, you know? And so wallows are a great source. So the reason why I don't personally hunt black bears over this one particular wallow is because I like to save that wallow specifically for elk, because the elk in the specific region in Northeast Washington, they're really sensitive to pressure. So at the moment you go in, you kill something, it's like all the elk just disappear. And so I'm like, is it worth it for me to kill a black bear over this last resort elk hunting hole that I have, right? Because it is so hard to already find elk here. And it's like, this is one of the only reliable places I know where I can go year in, year out, where I might have a chance at an elk. And so to me, it's like, I know there's a lot of bears around at this wallow, but I don't hunt it because I want to save it for elk. But that's not to disregard the point of wallows being a great source for bears. Later on, if I find a different wallow and there's no elk around, I would happily go and sit over that just for bears in August. Because most of the bears that hit the wallow, they hit at daytime. They hit it peak of the day when it's hot. And they come and they roll around because they want to cool off. And so
you can hunt the berries first light, hit the wallow midday, and
exactly.
go back.
It's a strategy that you can go about. And then obviously third, you just got to have some type of cover. Most of the time, I mean, here in Eastern Washington, we have a lot of rolling hills, agriculture, wide open stuff. You're probably not going to find a bear out there. There's not enough cover out there. They like dense forests like Northeast Washington or in the high country Cascades where they can really just dip in out of sight and then dip out, you know? And
every year somebody randomly shoots a bear out of those areas, but it's rare. I wouldn't consistently count on it.
What we're talking about here is how to consistently kill a bear, not just how to get lucky one time and kill a bear in the offset here. But in terms of how we hunt bears and how we like it, that's typically what we do. And then obviously when you're hunting berry patches, most of the time we're glassing that stuff. We're using optics because bears, especially the black ones, they are not hard to pick out. I mean, you have natural colors, browns, greens, and then there's a black dot. They're pretty easy to pick out.
I would say it's probably one of the easiest animals to spot.
Unless you're me and shoot color phase.
Unless you're Nate and shoot color phase, and then they blend right in with the environment. But for the most part, like bear hunting, the truth is it's a very simple animal to hunt. But simple doesn't necessarily mean easy. It's simple, find the berries. But the task of finding a reliable berry source, that's a chore in and of itself. And that's where most people don't get past. That's where most of us start out every year. That's what most of us don't get past every year. You know, last year we just all got lucky. I mean, we found a berry source where my bear was on. And so Zach and Jeff spotted that bear the day before. We went back in there, shot her about 200 yards where they left that bear. You guys shot yours over a cherry source or choke cherry source. And then, you shot yours in a blend of huckleberry / all these different other berries. Like, it was just madness in that little basin that you shot your bear in.
It was just all berries,
Yeah. In terms of early season fall bear, that's the concept that we tend to follow. It's basic, but again, basic and simple doesn't necessarily mean easy.
For sure. I think one thing that's interesting with bear is it's one type of hunting where having a good catalog of places in history plays to your advantage, but it is an animal that might require just more groundwork ahead of time.
Yeah, I think
it may take like a very common experience as Steve, like you had last year, where it takes a few days to learn to figure out, these berries are in, these berries are not in.
How we hunt nowadays is like, because we have this backlog of places where we've killed in the past or where we've seen bears in the past, it's always like, this is the first spot I'm going to check out. If that doesn't pan out, I'm going to go to spot 2, spot 3. And I think now we have like a dozen spots like just listed of where we're going to hunt or where we're going to check
We're
out
gonna go check out,
before
yeah.
we commit to, oh, this is where the bears are.
Yeah.
And is 12 spots enough? It's never enough.
No.
Yeah.
We might have this list of 12 this year go and all of them just be a complete bust.
So here I got
Absolutely.
a question for you. Let's say somebody watching right now is a brand new hunter, been hunting maybe for a few years, wants to go harvest their first black bear. They have no idea where they can find a huckleberry bush. They can no idea what food source. All they have is an Onyx map of thousands of acres of public lands we're blessed to have here in Northeast Washington. Where would you start? Let's say for somebody who doesn't know, like, do you just walk for miles every day until you find berries, or do you guys have any tips for these people? How do I go find? Because we keep telling them find berries, find berries. Like, how do you approach that aspect of it?
The good thing about berries in Washington is berries are very abundant. Like you can find huckleberries almost anywhere in the state, aside from like I was talking about earlier, like some of the dry agriculture, eastern Washington type areas. But anything that has mountains, the Selkirk Mountains, where we are so fond of up here, the Cascade Mountains, even the southeast mountain range, the Blue Mountains, there's huckleberries everywhere. But in terms of elevation, I would start at the lowest 3,500 feet elevation. That's typically the lowest I have personally seen huckleberries. I don't really know of any places off the top of my head where I've seen huckleberries thrive lower than that. Below 3,500, that's where I start looking at other berries, choke cherries, elderberries. Now, elderberries are kind of in this random band between like 3,500. They're like in that transition zone from like huckleberries where huckleberries taper out and then choke cherries start tapering out. Like elderberries kind of fill that width band. In terms of huckleberries and blueberries, though, like 3,500 feet and the higher you go, I mean, they can go as high as they want. Now, when it comes to lower elevation berries, this is where you have more variety. So you have choke cherries, as we talked about, rose hips. The other one that I think is very underrated that some of us don't talk about is blackberries. Blackberries, I mean, if you're familiar with the Snake River at all, it's a very dry climate. And in August, that whole shoreline all over the Snake River is littered in blackberries. And blackberries, if you don't know what they are, they look kind of like a raspberry, but they're just black.
Yep.
And they're very tasty. Love eating them. Those food sources, and this isn't even me, hunting bears in August, a lot of times I'm fishing, which is why I'm by the river. One of the biggest black bears I've seen has been off of blackberries.
Yeah.
Blackberries, and I was just scouting at this time. I wasn't even planning. I mean, it was seasoned, but at that time, I didn't know anything about blackberries and black bears. So I was just like, I hit on my cousin, like, hey, since we're going to go backcountry hunt mule deer in the spot, like, let's just go do a scouting trip a week before the hunt.
Yep.
We went in there. I
remember that.
Yeah, and we went in there, and it's like we're following up this little creek. And I remember, like, looking at my cousin, I'm like, there are piles of bear scat. Literally, like, not even exaggerating. Every 5 feet that you took a step. Like, if you looked, it looked like a place where a bunch of cows have come and hang out and, like, just dropped a bunch of dung. But these were bear scat. And I looked at my cousin. I'm like, why are there so many, bear scat in here? And then finally, because we were, like, moving through the tunnel and, like, it was so treacherous at that time, blackberries also have thorns on their vines. And so we're, like, we had machetes with us. Like, we were, like, hacking away, like, trying to clear out a path for us. And then finally, like, I started, like, paying attention to the bushes. And I'm like, what are these blackberry-looking things, right? Spoiler alert, they're actually called blackberries. And so I looked at them. I'm like, those look like they're edible, but I'm not going to take any chances.
Yeah.
And so we started going in, and we went, like, 4 miles in, just following this creek with all these blackberries. And then finally, I was like, I have enough of this. Like, we've done too much of this. Like, let's just climb up somewhere and let's just glass so we can find mule deer. And I think as we were doing that, we bumped a bear out of the bottom. And so we were up on one side of the canyon now. And then we're sitting there for like 15 minutes and we're exhausted. So we're sitting there, like, just looking over this other giant mountain face, just full of cliffs and yellow grass, super dry. And my cousin's like, yo, like, what is that up there? And I'm like, I'm looking up there. I'm thinking, like, oh, it's probably a giant mule deer, right? And it's like this giant blob, like a black blob, is just like cruising up the mountain. And this bear, it's a bear, is making this steep canyon wall look so easy. I mean, it's like steep, but he's just cruising up there. And like, he's clearly on a mission. Like, he's not like casually like moving around. Like, you can clearly tell like he's on a mission because we probably spooked him out of there. And I glassed him up. I'm like, dude, that thing is huge. So throw the spotter on it. I got like maybe like a 10-second clip of that bear on the spotting scope before he dips over. And it's like, I don't even know, maybe like a 350, maybe 400-pound black bear, right? And this is October. This is middle of the season that you can hunt bears. I didn't bring a rifle because nobody thought I was going to see a bear like that.
You guys remember the time we all saw one of the biggest bears we've ever seen? Nobody had a bear tag?
Yeah, we talked about that a couple podcasts ago and the
Yeah.
regrets that followed.
But it's like, so it's like, I guess that's a good leeway to the next point. Like, there's big bears and there's bears everywhere you look at me. And I saw one of the biggest bears at that time in super low elevation, super dry climate with blackberries versus on the flip side, the bear we saw in the high country, super high, like 7,000 feet elevation on huckleberry band type area. But I mean, the bear we saw, he was on the deer carcass, right? But it's just like, it goes to show how versatile these black bears are, where they can thrive in low elevation with all these food sources, or they can be as high as they can and still thrive. And so that's the beauty of bear hunting, because you can't really say that with a lot of species. A lot of species, you find a specific region with a specific habitat, and that's the only place you find them. Black bears, I mean, you can find them almost anywhere.
Yeah.
It's going to bring me to my last point.
Hit it.
Yeah. It's something I like to say in my fly fish videos, but you just got to have fun when you're out there. So I think especially in modern day social media influenced hunting world, there's so much emphasis for us to, if I'm recording it, to harvest a black bear, right? Or just watching all of us, online, there's this emphasis in you have to do things a certain way, like A, B, C. So you spend all summer scouting over Onyx, you have all these plans, you think you found berries, and then you get out there that day, and then the berries might be dried out, you might be not seeing bears. So it's the mindset ahead of time when those things get hard and the hours get really long, so do the days. Just remembering to have fun. That's why we're going out there. That's why we're hunting these animals, because there's so much emphasis. I just got to kill a bear. I got to find this source. When those things don't work out, it's so easy to get in that mindset of I'm just going to quit. And I think a lot of people do that. So it's bringing little things with you to make those long days pass that can ultimately make you successful. Just planning hours in between sightings is a pretty reasonable, I would say, days in Eastern Washington. So whether maybe you like to read, bring a friend along, maybe it's your family members, make a fun camp out of this whole experience, right? Go to a new area of the state and explore and camp there for 4 days, Because with bear hunting, it really takes me multiple days to plan. Like deer, I'll do a lot more day trips to dial in a certain area where those bears might be or whatnot. And then just at the end of the day, remembering to have fun. And as much talk, I have great friends obviously here that send me pins of some of the best huckleberries I think exist in Eastern Washington. And I got to make a confession. I've seen a lot of bears in huckleberry bushes. I have yet to shoot a bear out of a huckleberry bush. Having access to some of the best berries around, right? Just goes to show you, just because my plan A didn't work out. Like I had this perfect patch. He's going to come out at 8 in the morning. I'm going to drop him. I end up just defeatedly hiking or sitting in a random ridge. And sometimes I've run into quite a bit of bears doing that. It doesn't go to say like, don't plan ahead, and don't have a good game plan and hone in your other skills that evolve as a hunter. But you can have the coolest, newest gear, have this game plan. And then if you don't bring the right mindset for these hunts and the right attitude, I think that'll be your biggest killer before you even get to the food source, weather, cover, or any other things. So just knowing that ahead of time, I think preparing yourself mentally to do those things. And like Samong just touched, these bears live anywhere from, people hunt them on the ocean shores, right?
Yeah.
All the way by the coast to all the way we're hunting them at 7,000 feet. So animals are everywhere. They're likely wherever you're at, unless you're in those agricultural lands like we talked about. You just got to put in the work, have a good attitude, just go in the woods and have fun. If you're a brand new hunter who's never done this, I guarantee you, if you don't have a rifle, you just go out there and hike for 10 days, you'll probably see a black bear, right? So just remember that. Look at hunting forums, like how many people see bears just hiking around. They're not even hunters. So just having that attitude and that mindset of visualizing success, I think, can help you bring all these skills these guys just taught you to making you more successful.
I think that's a perfect segment to close out the podcast. You nailed it. Like, as much as we put an emphasis on how to find bears, kind of like your story, how it resonates with the rest of us, most of the time, you're mindlessly wandering, just kind of contemplating what you're even doing out there. Like, you're not finding the food source. You're not seeing bears. You're not seeing sign. Really learning to enjoy the hunt, the process of finding that food source. I think that's the biggest thing that I can give advice to anybody listening to this, is because it's so easy to go to a spot where you think it's going to be flourishing with huckleberries.
Exactly.
And get them like, oh, there's nothing here. And then just be like, oh, yeah, there's no berries. I'm going to wait. But sometimes it's like, no, it's just not in there right now. You just got to get ready to move around and go find other spots. And I think that's something that it's very important because most of the hunts that we did, even his bear hunt last year, where we had an amazing week-long hunt, more times than not throughout that hunt that never made it into the video, we were sitting there like, we don't know how to find a bear.
Yeah.
Like, we knew of the bear that he eventually ended up shooting about, but at that time, like in between the hunt from when we first saw it to when we ended up killing, there was a leeway or a segment in there where we were like, we can't kill that bear, so we have to go find another bear. And we were just lost. Let's close this out. So last year, we all shot our bears with 3 different guns, 3 different cartridges. This is a topic where everybody loves talking about guns. So let's briefly touch on that, and then we'll close out the podcast. So Steve, you mentioned it earlier, but like, what did you take your bear with again, and like kind of run through the setup and thought process on that?
So last year and this year, honestly, the only gun I have right now is I have my Savage 110 Ultralight in 6.5 Creedmoor. Love it or hate it.
What bullets are you shooting?
So I'm shooting the Hornady ELDX 143 grain bullets out of it. I think we tried a couple. You helped me set in that gun after I put it together. They just shoot. They're a factory round. They're just deadly in that gun. I mean, I shoot, and I'm not a professional, I would not call myself a great shooter. I can shoot sub-MOA with that gun. And leading to the gun, previously I had pretty cheap rifles. Like going back to how I started hunting, that's a whole different story. I didn't have a whole lot of mentorship. Multiple years I hunted with a really, really cheap Walmart gun with a scope that didn't have a brand name on it. You could not dial it or anything. I still, to this day, harvested some of my, including the biggest black bear I've ever shot, my biggest whitetail. That thing has killed way more animals than my modern nice gun, but it was chambered in 300 Win Mag. And something that it's honestly kind of embarrassing for me to admit, even on a podcast or something to talk about, but it's true. He's being afraid of the recoil. I'm a pretty big dude. I'm pretty tall. Like, I was like, I can handle a big gun. And I've had to realize over time that I cannot shoot big calibers just because of the recoil. I flinch. And I was a firm believer I'm not even capable of shooting over 200 yards just because when I first started shooting, because I would just not shoot past it. Where that changed is actually I shot one of your 6.5 Creedmoors one time.
Yeah.
And when I started shooting smaller calibers, I realized recoil. And as I learned how to manage recoil, I became way more accurate and much longer distances to where now, I mean, what's the deer mean you took was over 400 yards, I want to say.
Yeah, like 440.
And I can shoot quite a bit farther at the range. I probably wouldn't shoot at live animals at that distance. But
you are a prime example of accuracy kills.
Exactly.
But at the same time, the 6.5 Creedmoor is a very polarizing cartridge.
Yeah.
I am a fan of the 6.5 Creedmoor. I love my Creedmoor. Yep. How was the damage done on your bear? Because some people might be sitting here like, oh, my 6.5 Creedmoor might be a little small for a black bear. But
the damage was extensive. Trying to remember because I don't want to lie. The blunt force trauma caused inside the cavity was quite significant. I mean, it destroyed both of his lungs, top of his aorta, basically. Somebody who happens to work in emergency medicine, and I've seen a lot of gunshot wounds and bullets and what they can do to tissue. I was pretty impressed with what the 6.5 did to this black bear.
Yeah.
I mean, the power at that distance of the cartilage, I wouldn't even be concerned with a marginal shot placement. I wouldn't recommend it, obviously. Yeah. But there's no concerns with me. And how much more accurate of a shooter it made me. I'm not even taking the brand of the bullet, the rifle, just me stepping down. Like, I'm not telling you go buy a 6.5 Creedmoor. Just me stepping down to a smaller caliber that I was comfortable shooting with. Maybe that's a 308 for you. I don't know. It just made me a way better shot. Made me way more confident in the woods. So now, because I used to lay and look at an animal through my scope and just like hope I hit it. Where now it's like when I'm on something, I'm pretty damn sure I'm going to drop it.
Yeah.
So. And I've not had concerns with the damage. I've shot a mule deer with that rifle now. I shot a whitetail and I shot a black bear that I can remember, and both have pretty much were not tracking jobs.
Without even knowing it, he just validated all the points I made last week of the podcast, that the best rifle
is the one you can shoot the best.
The one that you are the most accurate.
Yep.
You shot yours with a 308 last year, killed the bear just fine.
Yep.
With his, it's a little bit different because his shot was perfect, but right as he took his first shot, the bear took a step, and so he hit it a little bit back. But if the bear stood where he initially shot, the bear would have died just fine.
Yep.
I shot mine last year with a 300 Win Mag. We all killed our bears just fine.
Yep.
If you missed last week's episode where Nate and I break down the best hunting rifle, you can check it out. But what we just discussed here, it validates my point next week. So
another point I want to make is like cost of ammo. So with a 308 rifle, you can practice. You can shoot every week for the same price. You know, most of us are not millionaires that you could shoot your own WinMag maybe once a month.
We
See?
should have just had him on last
really?
week to do this
He's-
podcast.
And I mean, most of
He's
us aren't
already-
millionaires. These things are expensive. And
He's
if they-
already he's just validating everything
Yeah.
we said last week's podcast. So if you haven't checked it out, we just wanted to surface level talk about like what we used last year on the Bears. But if you want more in-depth information about choosing a rifle, or in this case, a rifle for black bears, you can go check out last week's podcast. But with that said, we're going to wrap it up here for early season fall bear, and we're going to hop into fast facts.
Fast facts.
What is this?
So Fast Facts is
I'm not getting
not
warning
like
about
Trivia
any of this.
Duel. That's okay. You just get to sit and enjoy. And
You just get to learn.
This one you don't even have to guess. This is just Samong and I each week try to come with a fact that's interesting to us, hopefully interesting to any guests or viewers,
Does it
something
involve
we
fishing?
find funny.
Anything related to hunting, fishing, outdoor survival, whatever it is, it's just a random fact.
All right, so what I've got this week is, according to the U.S. Forest Service, a rainbow trout, which they categorize as weighing up to 5 pounds, has a large range of egg deposit size, but can lay up to 6,000 eggs in a single deposit.
It's quite incredible.
So one female fish can lay up to 6,000
Yeah,
eggs.
and that was they categorized it by weight, so that was like up to a 5-pound female could lay up to
So a
6,000 eggs.
10-pound trout can probably double that.
I'm not. That's where my fast expires.
It ends there.
We need a fish
Cool.
biologist for that one.
We love trout. That's good to know. My fast fact has to do with squirrels.
Of
I love
course.
squirrels.
Of course it does.
This is the fast fact. In the fall, squirrels will bury food in preparation for the wintertime. This method or this act of squirrels is often referred to as fall caching. They're storing
Interesting.
up food. One single squirrel can bury up to 3,000 nuts in one season.
Holy cow!
With this, squirrels are responsible for unknowingly planting thousands of trees each year because they simply forget where they planted their nuts. So with this,
I got so
They-
much to say here.
they contribute a large significance to the survival and diversity of many different
Interesting.
trees.
That's super cool.
That's a cool fact that
Yeah.
I know. Yeah. I mean, I knew squirrels did that. I had no idea about the trees.
Well, this was a great day. This was a great
This was fun.
discussion.
I'm glad it came out.
Steve, where can people find you at? What do you do? Give them a quick plug.
Northwest Outdoor Adventures. If you guys, it's a long name. People have told me to change it because nobody can remember. But think of the Northwest. That's where I live, and I like to hang out outside. So Northwest Outdoor Adventures.
For those of you that listen that hunt but may also fish, how Samong, our channel, we try to educate the viewers and provide some edifying content. Steve does the same thing with fishing,
Yeah.
talks about setups, does education. It's really an awesome channel.
If you want to learn about everything fly fishing, Steve's the guy. Go check him out, Northwest Outdoor Adventures. We appreciate having you guys along. Again, if you guys have fast facts or trivia duel questions for Nate and I, we'd love to hear it.
Yep.
Drop it down or send us emails. You can check everything in the description of the video or wherever you're listening to the podcast. With that said, we'll see you guys right here next week for episode 5.
Thanks for tuning in.